Today's video will be on the capitalist argument of overpopulation and of eugenics advocacy in movements such as under the British Raj in India and recent comments that have been made in the past few months by the French President Emmanuel Macron and by Bill Gates and the Gates Foundation. The nature of the relationship between population growth and economic development is one that is paradoxically defined under capitalism and imperialism, since on one hand there is the argument of supply and demand, similar to what scholar Thomas Malthus argued, in that population multiplies geometrically and food arithmetically. Therefore, whenever the food supply increases, population will rapidly grow to eliminate the abundance. On the other hand, there is also the argument of overpopulation, and that regions such as countries in Africa that are poor have an issue of being overpopulated, or women in these regions having too many children due to uneducation and not having access to resources. The reality is that populations decimate and shift with time as a result of migrations, deaths, wars, socioeconomic disparities, etc., all imposed by capitalism, imperialism, and colonialism. Therefore, the relationship between population growth and economic development is informed by how resources and wealth are distributed unevenly under the capitalist hegemonic system, which favors the bourgeois class that extracts its wealth from the lower, poor proletarian population. Population control arguments are eugenics advocacy and racist, as those who tend to argue for it do so under guise of wanting to wipe out non-white and other marginalized populations. This happened, for example, as I mentioned before, under British Raj or British colonial rule of India in South Asia, that on May 9th, 1901, the British Empire blamed overpopulation for the Indian famine of 1899 to 1900. 1 million lives were claimed in this famine, and when in reality it was British economic policy and racism that caused famines in India, not having too many people. These are also popular arguments for eugenics advocacy and racism, as those who tend to do it, like I said before, are under guise of wanting to exterminate populations for the benefit of these crowns, the British crown, the French crown, the Spanish crown, the Portuguese crown, the Belgian crown, and all these other crowns that colonized the other continents. The French president Emmanuel Macron said that Africa's socioeconomic problems are so-called civilizational and are a result of African women being presumably uneducated and having too many kids. These are popular arguments for sterilization of women of color, such as what the U.S. did to indigenous women in Puerto Rico, to Taino women in rural Puerto Rico that they're called Jibaras, what the Israeli state has done to Ethiopian women and in the settler colony of Israel in the past without their consent. Macron's comments were racist, misogynistic, and anti-black, and ignores the reality of the legacy of colonialism, especially French colonialism, that has shaped the current dire reality of women in the African continent, as well as how they are systemically disadvantaged as a result of capitalism and imperialism. Macron's comments are also individualist, in implying that the solution to poverty and lack of education among African women is to have less children and reproduce less, rather than systems of oppression that have developed throughout the course of centuries that produces said conditions to these women he condemns. The article on Africa by Bill Gates discussed that via the release of the annual Goalkeepers Report of the Bill Melinda Gates Foundation, the Gateses said that the poorest parts of the world are growing faster than everywhere else. More babies are being born in places where it's harder to lead a healthy and productive life. Africa as a whole is projected to nearly double in size by 2050, which means that even if the percentage of poor people of the continent is cut in half, the number of poor remains the same. This statement was made in reference to population control of Africa. This argument is capitalist and eugenist, since it's saying that reducing already historically marginalized populations is the solution to socioeconomic issues that actually, as a result of imperialist pillaging, capitalist exploitation, commercialization of enslaved Africans by Europe, and other branches of capitalism, imperialism, colonialism, which they conveniently and intentionally ignore.